Welcome to Trench Tactics, my series where I aim to provide a breakdown of factions, sub-factions, and strategies for the wonderful new game, Trench Crusade. Today, in the first proper video since the release of the 1.0 rule set, it's going to actually be covering my personal favourite sub-faction, the Great Hunger. This will be my first sub-faction video, and in order to do it justice, I'll cover some key mechanics of the faction they belong to, the Black Grail. The first thing to talk about for the Black Grail is infection markers. These are a special, more powerful type of blood marker that the Black Grail as a faction can inflict on opposing models, and in some circumstances, themselves. They can be used to modify dice and trigger bloodbath exactly like a blood marker, and can actually be combined with blood markers to trigger them. This means a standing model with 2 blood and 4 infection markers could be bloodbathed, spending them all together to pay the 6. Part of what makes infection markers superior is that if a model starts its activation with 1, it gains another, as the infection festers and intensifies. If you infect multiple enemy models, you get increasing amounts of value as they continue to gestate to higher values within your enemies. The Black Grail also benefits from being uniquely unnerving, causing enemy warbands who aren't also outstandingly demonic to take morale tests with -1 dice, increasing your chances of inflicting shaken or getting a cheeky win off of morale. Lastly, while not universal to Black Grail models, I'd like to mention Undead Fortitude here. It's a common ability in the roster that means non-fire injuries made against your models are rolled with -1 dice, and you also ignore the extra blood markers caused by gas weapons. This adds up to about a 25% survivability buff and is especially impactful when turning a flat roll into a -1 dice to injure. Now that we've looked at the core mechanic of the Black Grail, let's talk about the focus of today's video, the Great Hunger. This subfaction plays more uniquely than any other I've ever seen, overhauling much of the roster, giving access to new models, equipment, and upgrades, while being largely barred from traditional battle kit. They have a very melee-focused roster, with all their thralls being renamed as Ravenous, and able to fight unarmed with the critical keyword and 0 dice in melee, which is better than the -1 that thralls usually have, but we'll talk about them more later. Few of the models in their lineup can take ranged weapons, but they don't lose access to any glory items. They also have the choice to upgrade their Ravenous or Knights with Unending Starvation, which gives them a small but impactful extra inch of movement, but drives them mad with hunger, causing them to feel the need to charge or dash the nearest enemy model at the start of each turn. This can feel restrictive, but if you put it on a model, you know what you're signing up for: uncontrollable aggression. If you give them this upgrade, they can also use the Ravenous Infection on themselves as of their latest update. The Great Hunger has a horde playstyle, with many units benefiting from being in close proximity to allied models. Playing into the strength in numbers idea, they have a unique mechanic allowing them to pay for additional thralls using glory, going over the field limit to reliably outnumber the opposition, even being able to deploy these extra thralls in flanking, infiltrating positions. A common ability in the Great Hunger is Ravenous Infection, which lets models take a risky action to place an infection marker on any model within 1 inch, whether they be friend or foe. This can allow for early infection marker stacking, fueling the Great Hunger's spellcasting variety, the Arcana Putrescere. Important to know is that opponents can spend them against you, so be careful not to take actions with these infection carriers, or they'll likely spend them all to deny you their use. I mentioned the Arcana Putrescere briefly, but now we'll look at it in detail. It is a Great Hunger exclusive spellcasting mechanic, similar to Goetic powers. The powers will explain how many infection markers must be spent to cast them, and you can pay this cost by taking the markers from allies or enemies within 12 inches of the model trying to use the spell. Almost all must be purchased as upgrades to models with the ability to use them. Some of these powers have no cost and serve as passive upgrades to the model. In order to do the powers justice, and because I'll heavily reference them going forward, I'm going to explain them all now. Feral Hunger. For 20 ducats, you guarantee maximum charge distance. This is expensive and comes with a drawback of risky actions to charge something that isn't the closest enemy model, but on the right body can definitely be worth it. Keeping a massive threat range on your monsters is important, as it makes opponents think twice about how they play when they don't know which of their soldiers within 18 inches of something is about to get obliterated in melee combat from across the map. Ravenous Feast. 15 ducats to give a model an aura that allows them and allies within 4 inches to inflict infection markers instead of blood if they've charged this turn. This is considered niche, but as discussed, infection markers are straight up better than blood markers and fuel your spellcasting, so this definitely has its uses. Miasma of Pestilence. For 20 ducats, this gives access to your first casted Arcana that costs 2 infection markers to activate. It protects friendly models within 6 inches of the caster by giving any ranged attacks targeting them -1 dice to hit. Currently, this spell is situational, but being able to give extra protection to a roving horde of ravenous thralls around your Matagot Hag can be very valuable. Vile Churning, 20 ducats, to cast for 1 to 2 infection markers. Models within 1 inch of the caster without the artificial or demonic keyword take blood markers equal to the number of infection markers spent. This can be very effective if you use it right. Turning 2 infection markers on one of your models into 2 blood on enemies is a valuable transfer, especially if you catch multiple enemies in that 1 inch AoE. Mother's Call, a staple for many lists, only available to the Hag. A very affordable 10 ducats for a 1 infection spell that allows friendly Ravenous within 8 inches of the caster to move, attack, or activate Ravenous Infection. This is versatile enough to be a staple in most Hag lists, as it can benefit your infection economy, push Ravenous to objectives, or generate extra attacks when needed. Virulent Clot, 30 ducats, and gives a model the ability to spend anywhere from 2 to 6 infection markers when it or a nearby Ravenous is hit with an attack. In return, they reduce the injury roll by anywhere from 1 to 3, depending on how many infection markers were spent. Importantly, this also nullifies the fire keyword in the attack, often allowing the target to make use of minus dice to injure. This is an expensive pickup, but can be the difference between a win and a loss if it lets you save the life or toughness of a key model. Vomitus. This ability is pretty famous, or infamous, depending on if you're on the receiving end of it. For 1 infection marker, you draw an 8-inch line on the table. All models this line overlaps are subject to an injury roll, which can have a flat bonus to injure if you spend extra infection, up to a maximum of +2 if you cast with 3 markers in total. This attack also inflicts infection instead of blood, so can fund its own future casts. This is very good and definitely worth the cast. The auto hit helps guarantee infection markers on enemy models, with a good chance to just take them out if rolling with bonus dice from existing blood or infection. The Putrescere Arcana is very versatile, with options for both offense and defense and some serious standout abilities. Now, let's talk about the lady who'll be casting them more than anybody else, the Matagot Hag. 135 ducats to field, she comes in with 6 inches of movement, plus 3 dice to melee and no ranged capacity. Like many Great Hunger models, she can't take much in the way of classic battle kit, but can take a number of faction-specific options just fine, and can fight well unarmed. She has the important keywords Tough and Fear, meaning the first time she's put out of action, she treats it as if she were just downed, while the Fear keyword makes it so enemy models have -1 dice to hit her in melee, while making her immune to that debuff from other sources of fear. She has a few abilities, one of which being Pestilent, which makes it so that she inflicts infection markers instead of blood in melee, and inflicts an extra one whenever she does, helping fuel her own spells. She of course comes with Undead Fortitude, making it harder to injure her, which is important since she can't take armor. When it comes to magic, she can equip up to 3 different powers, the most in the roster, giving her a lot of flexibility. That's not all. She has another ability called Frenzied Followers, which lets allied models within 8 inches get an extra dice to dash, massively increasing their mobility and consistently, at twice the range of your average instrument's AoE. For her final unique and important ability, whenever an injury roll is made against her, you can nominate an allied Ravenous within 4 inches as the target instead, as long as it wasn't a blast weapon she was targeted with. As mentioned, she can't take armor, so the flavour of her tankiness are the numerous thralls under her control, willing to die for her sake. Overall, the Matagot Hag has a great stat line, serving primarily as a support caster and aura carrier, enabling her allies and accelerating her horde of thralls. While she's unlikely to deal great amounts of damage by herself, she can be vital to your warband, and the key to the horde playstyle the Great Hunger offers. Here are a couple of builds for the Matagot Hag. The support caster, 190 ducats. She takes 3 Arcana, Mother's Call, Virulent Clot, and Rapturous Feast. With these 3 options, she can do a lot for your warband. By foregoing equipment that improves melee, she focuses on supporting allied models with spells and auras. Some players like to run Vomitus on her, but this power is limited to 1, so it's often saved for another model who we'll talk about down the line that can position that 8 inches line a bit better. The melee-focused Hag for 205 ducats and optionally 2 glory takes Mother's Call, Feral Hunger, Rapturous Feast, and 1 to 2 Grail Devotees, making her very scary to deal with. The Grail Devotees add a flat +1 to injury rolls made in melee combat, totaling to +2 if you add the two together for second glory. Totaling +2 if you add the second for 2 glory. With Feral Hunger, you account for her lack of mobility and extend her threat range significantly. And with the recent change that's allowed her to make use of her own dashing aura, she can get into melee combat even faster. Not much is going to outrun her. The build comes together to make her a nasty melee threat, while Grail Devotees help overcome armoured targets. This Hag build wants to get stuck in right alongside a horde of thralls and Ravenous, tearing into key targets and spreading markers with Rapturous Feast. Now let's talk about your other leader option in the Great Hunger, the Lord of Tumours. 130 ducats, 6 inches of movement, +4 dice to melee and 1 dice to range. He has Tough and Fear, which we discussed already, but also Strong, allowing him to ignore the heavy keyword and wield a single two-handed weapon in one hand. Similar to the Hag, he has Beelzebub's Touch, dealing an extra infection marker when he puts in a marker on the enemy in melee. He is also never considered unarmed and can attack twice if not given better weapons to swing with. He has the tankiness of Undead Fortitude and gets to take a single Arcana Putrescere power from the Great Hunger subfaction. The Lord of Tumours in Great Hunger is an alternative combat-focused leader, more independent than the Hag. He is a terrifying melee threat and generally used if not leaning into the mass thrall playstyle. A decent build for him is the Fang Lord, named after his primary weapon. Costing a fairly expensive 247 ducats and 2 glory, you take Feral Hunger, a Putrid Shotgun, a Pestilent Fang, Plague Blade and Reinforced Armour, along with 2 Grail Devotees, the second one being optional. The Putrid Shotgun has a 12-inch range, an extra dice to hit, the Assault keyword, and causes infection markers instead of blood. The Pestilent Fang ignores armour on a crit, while always inflicting an extra infection marker on top of any other it inflicts. In his offhand, the Plague Blade causes infection markers instead of blood as well. If you couldn't tell from that rundown, this build spreads infection markers like it's nobody's business, comboing with Beelzebub's Touch very nicely. He can have a +3 flat bonus to injure with the Pestilent Fang, which is terrifying with his +4 dice to hit. Being part of the Great Hunger enables this, as the Fang is unique to them, as well as enabling Feral Hunger to help overcome his most notable weakness, slow movement. If you build him like this, he will be a lawnmower that kills or toughs almost everything you send him against. Just be careful not to overextend, as even with -2 armour from Reinforced Armour and the buffs of Undead Fortitude, he will still struggle to withstand the amount of firepower your opponent will want to put into him. The Butcher Knight is up next. 60 ducats to hire one, and they come with 6 inches of movement, +2 dice to melee and +0 dice to range. With both the Strong and Fear keywords, they are already shaping up to be serious melee threats. The interesting mechanic with the Knight is their ability to pick from 3 ranks, allowing them to gain extra abilities that we'll go over soon. They also have the abilities Undead Fortitude and Ravenous Infection, improving durability and adding to the infection economy. Already, the Butcher Knights show off a strong melee stat line, with an affordable base cost and access to lots of important equipment options. I've got a build here for each of the 3 Great Hunger exclusive Knight ranks, starting off with the Knight of Twin Cleavers. This build takes the Twin Cleavers title, a Putrid Shotgun, Pestilent Fang, Trench Club and Reinforced Armour, totaling 143 ducats. With the new Grail Devotee rules, making it more likely they'll spread between models, this build can also justify adding a Grail Devotee to bring the total up to 158. The Knight of Twin Cleavers rank grants the Shrapnel keyword to their melee attacks, meaning they inflict an additional blood marker on melee injuries and ignore the offhand penalty that would normally give them -1 dice to hit. We already discussed the Shotgun Fang combo with the Lord of Tumours, but it's still effective here, outputting a lot of infection markers. If you have Glory available, this build benefits greatly from Devouring Jaws, a 2 Glory Great Hunger upgrade equipment, granting an additional attack. For even more infection, consider switching the Trench Club out for a Plague Blade. Second, the Knightly rank of the Feast, a leaner build, with the Knight of the Feast title, Black Spot Rifle and Butcher Bayonet with standard armour, adding up to 120 ducats. The title grants +1 dice to Ravenous Infection rolls for themselves and allies within 3 inches. The Black Spot Rifle is a unique weapon with 24 inches of range that inflicts infection markers, and upon hitting the closest thrall to the target within 12 inches, can charge that model immediately after the injury is resolved, out of sequence. Combine this with some smart setup moves, and you can engage enemy models in melee very quickly with your Ravenous. The Butcher Bayonet gets +1 dice to injure, and lowers the roll needed to crit by 1 for most allies within 3 inches of the wielder, with only a couple of exceptions. The build comes together by proliferating infection markers with his knightly rank, accelerating thralls with a black spot rifle, then executing key targets with the Butcher Bayonet, taking advantage of the presence of the thralls you've helped speed up. Lastly, the Butcher King rank. With it, a putrid shotgun, Butcher Bayonet, trench shield and reinforced armour, you get a total of 155 ducats. The rank itself means that if the knight survives a battle with at least 1 melee kill, you gain a point of glory. This of course means he's suited mainly for campaign play, but it can be important for helping fund your devotees and cradle thralls which you buy with the glory. For this purpose we built him to survive with -3 armour and to kill with a shotgun bayonet charge combo. Next, the Desiccated Husk, our final elite choice. At a cheap 55 ducats, they have 6 inches of movement, +2 dice to hit in melee, and +0 to range. These units are the equivalent of the Corpse Guard for the Great Hunger, filling out the elite ranks. They are different, however, up from a +1 in melee to a +2 with critical when compared to the Corpse Guard, and losing the Bodyguard rule. This is a fair trade-off for the Great Hunger's playstyle, and between this and Fear, they are good in melee. They have the classic Undead Fortitude, and uniquely to them, the ability Parasitic Tick, which means that when they inflict a marker on a non-Black Grail model, the Husk can remove a blood marker from itself. This is underrated in my opinion, though opponents who know about this ability will often spend the blood marker that's on you to debuff your attack anyway, expecting it to land and heal the blood off. The Husk is overall a close alternative to your Butcher Knight, serving similar roles with moderate effectiveness. The Tick increases survivability in longer fights, and overall he's your cheapest elite option. For their builds, there are 2 primary roles to fill. Firstly, you can give him a black spot rifle for 25 ducats, and have that be the single job of the Husk. 80 ducats total, and they'll support from the rear, using the rifle to send thralls up the board, and into enemies a little faster. They won't do much apart from this, and will sit back on objectives, being a very budget build for when you really need a black spot rifleman. On the other end of the spectrum is the Vampire build, 149 ducats, kitted out with a putrid shotgun, 2 plague blades, reinforced armour, combat helmet and a Grail devotee. He becomes a serious problem in melee. The build aims to take full advantage of the Parasitic Tick ability, keeping markers off of the Husk and putting them onto opposing models. Now for the legendary Gregori Gula, one of the coolest models in the game in my opinion. It's 145 ducats to bring him, and you get a crazy 9 inches of flying movement, and +2 dice to hit in melee. A Gula cannot take any battle kit gear, except for a grasping maw, but doesn't need any. It causes fear, can fight unarmed, attacks twice, and be taught a power from the Arcana Putrescere. Its first ability is Gnashing and Tearing, which causes its melee attacks to have an extra dice on injuries, and on the turn that it charges, it can attack a 3rd time. That's like swinging 3 greatsword attacks. Imagine a shock trooper with 9 inches speed and +2 to hit, flying around the field, obliterating anything that offends him with 3 swings. Absolutely terrifying. On top of that, Plague-Ridden Flesh is an even stronger version of Undead Fortitude, causing enemies to roll -2 dice to injure it if the attack lacks the fire keyword. While it has no armour, that alone makes it difficult to put down. Next up, a pretty crazy ability called Dormant Hunger. Once per round, when a Gregori Gula is taken out of action, it instead goes dormant. When this happens, it removes all infection markers on itself, but not blood markers, and replaces itself with a 60mm token representing a dormant state. This token counts as dangerous terrain, meaning models starting their turn there must make a risky action check or roll on the injury table. If at any point in the game one of your thralls goes within 1 inches of the marker, the Gregori Gula is restored to the field, downed at least 1 inches away from enemy models. On a turn that this happens, the Gula can still take its turn if it hasn't done so already. While the Gula maintains blood markers and comes back downed, your opponent probably needed to spend them all to kill it in the first place, so it probably comes back healthy. That is a very scary ability for enemies to deal with, and you'll likely bring enough Ravenous thralls to keep the Gula fed and active. It cannot be overstated, this beast is one of the fastest threats in the game, and it comes with Infiltrate. If it wants something on the enemy team dead that isn't in the same weight class, it can probably reach it and kill it in 1 turn. With Fear, Plague-Ridden Flesh, and Dormant Hunger, This thing is tough to get rid of, especially if you want it gone for good. When looking at builds, the important question is which Arcana Putrescere to take. Rapturous Feast is a good option with a strong use case due to its large base size and speed, increasing the number of models it's likely to hit. Definitely a contender. Vomitus, though, is hard to deny. The Gula is the model I mentioned earlier that steals this from the Hag, from its mobility meaning that it can set up devastating casts with the 8-inch line. You'll struggle to resist taking this on the Gula. Lastly, Feral Hunger. The auto charge is okay, but the Gula already moves so fast there's little point. You can only charge models within 12 inches and the Gula already moves 9, meaning you only fail a max distance charge with a roll of 2 or less. It's just not a necessary pickup, and the drawback of a risky action to charge something other than the closest target is not worth that. Now, should the Gula take a Grasping Maw? For 15 ducats, it gives a model the choice to make a risky action to move an enemy model within 12 inches and line of sight by 1d6 inches in a straight line towards them, essentially pulling them in. It's restricted in a number of ways. It can't trigger free strikes and cannot force an enemy model into difficult or dangerous terrain. While this is a cool ability, it's rarely worth taking on the Gula. The best use case is after a failed charge, where you pull in the model for the opportunity to actually act in melee instead of ending up dead in the middle of the field. But the Gula will rarely fail that charge, like I mentioned. Now for the meat of your horde, the Clawing Tide, the Ravenous. 35 ducats, 5 inches of movement, 0 dice in melee, incapable of ranged action. This model cannot take any gear except Grasping Maw or Unending Starvation, but has improved melee over standard Grail thralls, elevating them from the -1 dice in melee to a solid 0, and granting them the critical keyword. The Fear keyword is good on them too, making them a very cheap carrier for a very good keyword. They get the great abilities of Undead Fortitude and Ravenous Infection, giving them durability and making them key infection spreaders. Lastly, with Overwhelming Horde, they gain +1 dice to melee attacks, encouraging the Swarm playstyle. These guys are the key models for Horde playstyles, functioning best in packs of 2 to 3, if not sticking with the Matagot Hag. They can put infection markers on each other early to help fuel the Putrescere Arcana, and despite a slow 5-inch stat line, the Hag will usually be nearby to help them dash consistently. I won't talk about builds with these guys as they function entirely fine with nothing, which is usually how they're taken anyway. But they do have an alternative, the Fly Ravenous. The same cost and stat line, but they gain an inch of movement and the flying keyword, making them far more mobile. The trade-off is they lose the tankiness of Undead Fortitude, making them very squishy, especially to shooting. The Fly Ravenous's job will be to rush objectives, or get where you need a Ravenous to be just a little bit faster than their flightless brothers and sisters, whether that's to support an allied model or tie up enemy backline targets. Lastly, for the Ravenous, they have their glory-purchased alternative, the Cradle Thralls. The Great Hunger mechanic means you can take a Grail or Fly Thrall for 2 glory, and either add them straight to your warband, or hold them in reserve. What makes them special is you can bring up to 3 of them on top of your main force, and they don't count towards your maximum field strength. Not only this, they gain the Infiltrator keyword, meaning they can be set up anywhere you want as long as they're 8 inches away from enemy models. This is crazy and very fun. It allows for an effective head start on many objective scenarios, and if you're maxing out your field strength, you can outnumber even other wide-style warbands, giving you a unique and powerful advantage. The last unit on the Great Hunger's roster is the Prowler, their version of the Black Grail Hound. 55 ducats for 8 inches of movement, with an extra dice to hit in melee. The only thing they can take or equip is a Grasping Maw, as a backup for if they fail a charge. You can also pay 5 ducats to make it deal infection markers instead of blood, which is almost always worth it. They have a few abilities, causing fear and having Undead Fortitude, but also having +1 dice to dash from Frightening Speed, which also allows them to keep their full movement after being downed. Lastly, Disease Carrier means if an enemy is activated in melee with a Prowler, they suffer an infection marker. This means that even if your Prowler is killed, if it made it into melee and got taken out there, it will at least have planted a growing infection marker on an enemy model. Consistent performance is always valuable. The Prowler is overall key to many Great Hunger playstyles, offering a fast, affordable menace that can spread infection markers and grab objectives. Finally, I'll go over a 900 ducat 8 glory example list, the recommended size for a one-off game, or it was before the 1.0.0. Either way, I think this list gets the point across. This list is a Horde-style Matagot Hag roster, playing to the strengths of the Great Hunger by keeping model count high. It utilises Cradle Thralls, focusing on the fly variant to take full advantage of their speed and flight when flanking with Infiltrate. It combines strong elites with multiple Thralls and Ravenous. The game plan sees the Hag escort the Swarm, supporting with Putrescere Arcana spells and her aura. Meanwhile, the Gregori can flank and aim to get off some big Vomitus casts, picking off high-value enemy models. Your Prowlers can achieve mobility dominance over the board, reaching objectives, while Cradle Flies can either do the same or lurk near the Gula, ready to bring it back if it goes down. For some details not visible here, the Hag has Mother's Call, Virulent Clot, and Rapturous Feast. The first Knight has the Twin Cleaver rank, the second has the Knight of the Feast rank, and lastly, the Gregori Gula, of course, has Vomitus. This video was made in collaboration with some of the fine people over at Creaturecaster, so I wanted to give them a shout out and direct you guys to their work. The Great Hunger is of course an official Trench Crusade subfaction created by the folks from Creaturecaster, who recently finished a campaign to help launch the official Great Hunger miniatures. The models they're making aren't just for the Great Hunger though, as with the stretch goals they hit, they've shown as alternatives for core Black Grail units like the Amalgam, the Heralds of Beelzebub, as well as mercenaries like the Sin Eater. I highly encourage you to show them some love. They make some of the best looking models around, and have designed one of the funnest factions to play. Links in the description. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for waiting, and thank you to the people at Creaturecaster for chatting with me and supporting me in making the video. The 1.0 rules have dropped just recently, so I'm excited to dig into the changes and get some videos out regarding what's different. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, like and share, leave a comment telling me what you want to see next, subscribe if you want to stick around, and become a channel member if you want to honour me with that support. In return, you'll get to vote on what faction or subfaction gets covered next. This has been Trench Tactics, and I'll see you around.